Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from theethicalpanda.com.
And I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
Today we're talking about Minute 21, which begins with Laufey calling Odin a murderer and a thief, and ends with Thor giving Loki a look with a capital L. Joining us on the show today, we have Cass Fredrickson from the Lord of the Rings Minute. Cass, as a Lord of the Rings person, how do these kind of fantasy battle scenes line up for you?
Oh, wow. We're just going right in, aren't we? I really like it when a fight scene tells a story or tells us something about like the characters or what's going on. And I think that this one that we're talking about this week is actually like really good at that. It's no Helm's Deep, but you know,
what can be.
It doesn't need to be.
Yeah. We'll have more on this battle and all sorts of things in just one moment.
This week, we are having a great conversation about the battle in front of Utgard Hall with our wonderful guest, Cass, from Lord of the Rings Minute. And we want to know what you think about this battle that's going on here. Jump into the conversation with us and other Marvel fans over in our Discord server. Just head to truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute and click on the Discord link.
Let's just dive right into this, because the minute starts with Laufey, now in this huge shot. He's taking up the entire arch. Cass, you weren't here for it, but last week, Andy and I basically did Zapruder film level analysis, trying to figure out exactly where he's standing and where he's looking. And, he stands there and he's got this great line of, "You're nothing but a boy trying to prove himself a man." What kind of sense do you get of who Laufey is and what he's trying to do in this moment?
I think I get the sense that he's very old because, he says a boy trying to prove himself a man, and Thor is 1,000 or something. And he's also trying to be intimidating too. He doesn't want to look weak in the face of these invaders, I like what little Laufey we get in this movie. I understand why we don't get more of it. I don't know if you guys are spoilery or not.
As much as we need to be.
Okay, cool. But what little time we spend with him, I always kind of enjoy. I think he's really interesting.
Yeah. I think he's a great character, especially because in this moment, and we'll talk about more because of what happens later in the minute and later in this scene over the next couple minutes we'll talk about all week long. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what he's trying to do. Because on some level, it does feel like he doesn't want a fight to happen here.
Yes.
He doesn't, but he's also kind of egging Thor on, in terms of if you don't want Thor to fight, calling him a boy and mocking him and mocking his father is not strategy number one. And is it just that he has so much anger and resentment that he can't help getting in a little nudge at Thor? Is he kind of trying to test Thor and see how much he can get away with? For both of you, what do you kind of think Laufey's got going on there?
Well, I mean, he is king, and I feel like part of that is just, he needs to speak up as king in front of all of his Frost Giants, so that they know that he's just not going to lay down and do whatever Thor wants. But it's a really interesting place that he is in right now, because they took the casket of ancient winters all those years ago, and here they are left with this planet that is falling to pieces and crumbling because they don't have that source of power anymore. But that was kind of like the peace treaty, and it's such a strange peace treaty to agree with. So I imagine that the Frost Giants are a little, irritated, and the fact that Thor comes down here, thumping his chest, ready to fight. I think it's pushing buttons certainly across the board for all the Frost Giants.
It's a lot of posturing, right? This is his way of being diplomatic but also not losing face in front of his subjects. And the the thing in this minute when he's talking, when he kind of like pauses to reflect about, not what your actions will unleash. And I think that is the thing in this minute that kind of speaks to like, he truly does not want there to be a fight, but he also like, he can't back down because he's a man or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, I think he definitely wants to save face, and probably, I'm guessing, some of the Frost Giants there are just as eager as Thor is to get into a fight.
Yeah.
And so he kind of knows he's got to kind of manage all of this. And then, of course, immediately afterwards, we get this great shot that I think is just one of my favorite, like, moments of staging, because it's a blink and you miss it, but it's so perfect, because Thor is saying, this boy is growing tired of your mockery. It's him, like, responding. But the shot is of Thor looking tiny and looking completely surrounded, and I just get the sense of like, he has no idea what's going on in this moment.
Right. The fact that there are frost giants coming out of every nook and cranny around kind of the walls of the remnants of Utgard Hall to kind of surround them. I mean, it's pretty frightening that there are these. I mean, I was trying to count just how much movement I was seeing on screen, and I think there's at least 20 that are coming out, and there are they number 6. So I mean, they're quite outnumbered, and we know that there are more, and so I think that it's one of those things where he's just blind to, he's kind of got that blind rage, and that's how Thor operates at this point in the film.
Well, and it's one of those things where, like, if you're playing one of those video games where you, like, move military units across a map, like, if there's ever a time, like, even for level 1 to test, like, is this a trap? Moving into a space where you're now completely surrounded by rock, only one small exit and entrance, like, everything about it says this is a bad idea. And of course, we see that at least Sif and Volstrog, they definitely get it. I love getting to see, like, them not inspired by Thor's speech. Like, they're looking around, they see the giants forming ice weapons, they seem to know this is going to go pretty badly.
Yeah, it's, and you see, like, I love that there's a shot of a frost giant right after we see Sif, who he looks raging angry. I mean, they already have those red eyes. They look like, monsters with those red eyes, but he kind of, like, the way that it's almost like he's cracking his neck, getting ready for the fight. And that's when you really start seeing these frost giants preparing for battle, as we start seeing them, doing what they do best, forming ice on their extremities to use as weapons. And so we see one forming a sword on his arm. The next, honestly, I wanted to talk to you both about this next one. I have no idea what's going on with this second one we see, because we only see his thighs, and there are 2, like, ice weapons forming. It seems like crotch level going down. I really am not quite sure what I'm looking at in that second moment of weapons being formed.
PG-13 movie, some things have to be implied and not really stated, and left to the imagination. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's one of those, like, I was commenting this before, and Cass, I'm wondering how you found it. This whole scene is so dark that it wasn't until I was really going this, like, play 5 seconds, pause, play 5 seconds, pause, really review of the full minute. I every time I've seen it in theater or on TV, it just feels like it's just darkness, and I get the sense of ice weapons forming, but that level of detail I never get to see.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, I was deep in the Thor fandom on Tumblr back in, like, 2012. So, like, combing over the movie for, like, screenshots to use for, like, fan edits and stuff, like, this part is really good because, they're like, Thor and Loki are standing very close to each other. So, like, if I wanted to do, like, whatever. But it's also really, really dark. So it's, this, I wish it was a little lighter because the rest of the movie is so colorful. But I also kind of really like the contrast, between, like, the different realms. Like, Asgard is so saturated and this is so, like, blue.
It's so interesting because the sun's out, that's something I don't think I ever really paid attention to, the fact that as they're approaching the plaza here, we actually see the sun in the sky. I mean, it's low in the sky, granted. We'll see it later and it's still low in the sky. So it's not like the sun has gone down or anything, but it's just like, this is daytime on Jotunheim, and it's just a very dark, cold place. And I mean, yes, I certainly appreciate when there's a little more light so I can see things more easily. But to your point, Cass, I really appreciate that the filmmakers were saying, you know what, this is a dark and cold place. Let's kind of make it a little darker than you would normally expect.
Yeah.
I think I figured out what's going on with this shot at like 23 seconds with the ice.
Double crotch weapon.
Yeah, with the two legs. Because the legs it's like two of them standing side by side, and they are forming them in the space between each, like where they're standing, because the legs do not make a single person.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's like they both have their arms pointing downwards, like in front of each other. So,
you can tell that they're like opposite legs instead of...
They're two... Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so much more comfortable with that.
I'm
as
sorry
far as how the Frost Giants fight.
I'm going to guess there's a good 3 or 4 seconds of a shot that got wound up on an editing room floor, but that might have given a little more context to what was going on there.
Maybe.
So especially one thing I was really excited to talk to you about as our sort of resident Lord of the Rings, expert.
Thank you.
The character of Volstagg, especially as he's presented.
Volstagg, no R.
Volstagg, thank you. Me and pronunciation's awful. He's basically a Tolkien dwarf, right? I mean, the rotundness, the huge appetite, the beard. He never talks about mining, but I feel like he ticks every other sort of dwarf from Lord of the Rings.
He is very Gimli-esque. I mean, he's a bit tall for a dwarf, I think, but.
Though I think notably the shortest of all the warriors that he travels with. But yes, he's not...
Is he the shortest? I thought he was the tallest. Because Hogan's pretty short, too.
Yeah, I think Hogan's the shortest.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, the way they shoot him, I think I always think of him as just short and rotund. But, dwarf projection.
Yeah, and there is a weird shot in here when the ice weapons are forming, when you see in the distance, you see the Warriors 3 standing there, and he's kneeling. And so I don't know if that's something that he does often when he's prepping for battle, but maybe that's one of the things that might throw you off sometimes. Like maybe we're just not seeing that he's kneeling more than we realize.
Right. And of course, we see that he's holding his axe. Andy, tell us more about the axe he's holding.
Well, I think it's a super cool axe. It's got multiple blades within the axe head itself, which I find really interesting. But I think it's also interesting that for the context of the film, they actually named these weapons, because in the comics, from what I could find, he kind of brandished a variety of weapons. Often it was just a sword. Often, as we've discussed, it's his body. He uses his rotundness to stop people, and it's a little silly in the comics. But in the movie, the axe, although it's never named in the film, but it's actually called Branderhide Undersigir, and that's the name of his axe.
What does that translate to? Do you know?
I don't know. From what I could tell, they came up with it. I tried to put these through various translators for Norwegian or different languages that were kind of up in that part of the world, Swedish and stuff, and they never translated to anything other than back to Branderhide Undersigir.
Interesting.
And that's one of the things where I've got to wonder, did they come up with names because just in case they wanted to mention it at some point in time? Did they come up with names because they knew people would like the lore? Or maybe this is my cynical side, did they come up with names to sell more merchandise? Because if it's not just this guy's axe, it's Bundesschmier, whatever it is. You can sell that better.
It's interesting. I was doing some live translating, and Undersigir, if you separate it out, it means wonder victory.
Oh.
In Norwegian. Branderhide, I couldn't figure out how to separate in a way that actually translated to anything, but I do think, there you go, the last part of it, wonder victory. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one thing we should mention also, and it's going to be a big deal in these 5 minutes. I know Andy feels we should be hanging our heads in shame. We did not mention our first view of the Jotun beast. It was in the last minute, 20 minutes and 25 seconds. Definitely going to check that out again. And that's definitely a kind of foreboding of there's a lot more going on here than Thor seems to want to recognize.
Yeah, it's I think we were spending all of our time in that particular moment talking about Sif's footwear, and so we're too
battle
focused on
wedges?
that. Exactly,
Yeah.
and not talking about the fact that there's the Jotun beast off to the side there. So,
and so now, of course, we get Loki jumping in, and he tries to warn Thor. We should get out of here. And Cass, you can jump into this because I think this is going to be the running debate through this entire movie. what is Loki doing where he's trying to manipulate his brother, and where is he just actually like being sincere? Because he clearly, like, Loki obviously has manipulated his brother to come here. Loki wants to cause trouble. But I think also Loki, like, knows, like, this might not be a good idea for them. Do you think he, like, would he, obviously what he's saying is, like, right up there with what Laufey said as the best ways to get Thor to start a fight. Do you think Loki knows that and is intentionally egging him on, or is he actually a little afraid and wanting to convince Thor to back down?
I think he is being sincere in this moment because of two reasons that happen later on. One later on this week, and then one where he's speaking with the Warriors 3 after the fact. And I don't know if I should just like mention those. I don't know your guys' policy on spoilers. But...
we're kind of fluid. I mean, we used to be a lot more strict in earlier seasons.
Yeah.
I know in Iron Man, I was like, if we're only minute 23, there's no minutes after this yet. But I think at this point, we're just like, I mean, everybody's seen these films. So, I mean, we're not going to specifically spend like 20 minutes talking about that. But I mean, if it makes sense to bring it up in context for a point, then I think that's fine.
So I think his reaction to the taunt, and Thor's reaction to the taunt in the next minute, and the fact that he like mentions that he told a guard that they were going here and that they shouldn't have made it this far. Like, I think he is being sincere because he doesn't want to die. Like he wants, at this point, he wants to cause trouble. He doesn't want to cause harm. And he's because Thor has his like war blinders on, so like he has no idea. He doesn't have any awareness of what is going on, which is why he's like, look around you.
Yeah. He got Thor to put his hand in the cookie jar. He knows Odin should be showing up any moment now.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to smash all the cookies before like Odin catches him. I can understand that. Yeah, I think that was fair.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like the whole thing with Heimdall too. Like I think he was probably trying to slow them down a little bit, in the hopes that Odin would stop them before they even went into the Bifrost. But I as we've just been discussing, it's like that's what's exciting and interesting about Loki is he constantly is able to think and readjust his plans to make sure that he still is maneuvering the way that he wants as he moves forward.
Right. And so then Laufey jumps back in and says, you know not what your actions will unleash, I do. And I think this is the moment, Cass, you were just mentioning, where that this is really what convinces me that Laufey does not want to fight. He's kind of saying, like, if you go down this road, it's going to be bad for you, it's going to be bad for us, let's just walk away.
Especially the way that Colm Fiore is playing it, like the way that he takes that pause and like looks down, like reflective of the darker times when war was nearly destroying them. I mean, you look at the planet, it still has put them in a bad place. But I mean, I think he's probably speaking to the fact that they have done nothing but suffer over the last 1,000 years. And it's been a very difficult time. I think that's really interesting.
Definitely. And especially if, here I'm probably headcanoning like crazy, but we were going back and forth on, did Laufey know that Frost Giants were going to try to invade Asgard and, steal the casket? Because I still am on board team, like, he found out about it later, but he didn't know this was going to happen. And to him, that might be a sense of, like, my own people are getting restless. Like, my own people are spoiling for a fight. That's a fight they can't win. And so I need to kind of top this all down.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to furthering that conversation when there's more interactions between Laufey and Loki. I want to jump back a little bit because I think we jumped over the part where Thor actually kind of crushes Loki's desire to get out, and that whole "know your place, brother."
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an interesting thing to say to his brother, and two, I keep trying to figure out. Okay, is this? I'm assuming that is from older prince to younger prince, but is there also like some, as far as like the roles in battle we've seen them always in this position of Thor in front and then Loki and Sif in the next set of ranks and then the Warriors 3 in the back. Is there something as far as like the ranking, or is it just a like prince to prince thing that he's saying here?
I think it's like older brother, younger brother, like, he's handling this conversation, so like for Loki to kind of undercut him while like he's talking like king to king, I think I think that would, plus he's like super, super prideful still at this point. So, I think that plays a part in that as well. But I don't know that it's like the friend group ranking.
Yeah, I'm kind of on both. I think it's definitely that. But the extent to which, I mean, basically they're a D&D party, you know, like, and Thor is very clearly the tank. He's the barbarian. Loki's the rogue, you know, and to me, yeah, it's not that friend group ranking as much as it's just like, Thor's like, look, I make the decisions where we fight, you know, you follow me, you follow my orders, you know, and somewhat that's younger Prince and somewhat just, you don't decide when we have battle because you're going to be hiding in the shadows and using illusion magic anyway. So like, you know, you just shut up and do DPS work and I'll do the negotiation. Sorry, something about, I think it's because we took a good look at Volstag's hammer, which to me looks like the kind of thing you get in like late level. His axe, sorry. I'm thinking again about dwarves. It looks like the kind of thing you get in like late level World of Warcraft, you know, where the weapons get more and more crazy looking and less practical, but they just look awesome. So
right.
Yeah, his axe is pretty spiky. Like, yeah. I like it.
Right. Well, and you know, the fact that, I mean, I love that it has like multiple blades on the axe head, but I was like, if you're fighting with that, like, does that make it harder to pull out like pieces of, you know, bodies are getting like wedged into the grooves? Like, I don't know. I start thinking like all these horrifically gross thoughts about like, how would this do you have to like work? Hose that thing out, like get some sticks and like pry out the little bone chunks that are stuck in there?
Does it like compromise the integrity of the weapon because it's like multiple pieces? Like, will it crack easier? Yeah. No, I get that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, badassery level 10, practicality level 3. Right. You know, but like at that point, who cares? But yeah, no, thank you for bringing us back. I think that's another great like Thor Loki moment. And also I think it helps that like, I think Loki's actions over this scene are fluid somewhat, you know, that like he might go in with this one plan, but Thor says something like that, like that's going to just spark up all the resentment all over again and all that. And I do also love, again, just Chris Hemsworth showing that he is not only a gorgeous, gorgeous man with terrible eyebrows.
Although to that point, I will say his eyebrows look darker while we're on Jotunheim.
The thirst factor has gone up a little bit because we're not seeing the uber blondness there, but just he's an amazing actor as well. And there's that one shot where he doesn't say a word, but you can just see him literally like shaking with anger. And I think it's a little bit of uncertainty too, but he's not. To me, this is like the person it's a lot more bravado than confidence, and he can't ever express doubt because then he might start to doubt himself. Is that kind of similar sense to what you get?
That makes sense. Yeah. No, I like your reading of like bravado over confidence, because like I don't think Thor is really confident until like the back half of this movie, like the last quarter of this movie. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's all like high school bully, you know.
Yes,
like he's very good because no one's ever stood up to him and been able to challenge him.
Well, and that makes for a great character arc too, and that's why I really do enjoy his story as we kind of watch him transition from this place at the beginning of the film. And as we've said a few times, you know, we're lucky we didn't get the really bad Thor who's like pushing over servants and flipping tables, and I mean, we see the table flip, but like the way that he pushes the servants out of the way to do so. I mean, he was really just like a terrible, like the rudest of rude princes to people. And I'm glad we didn't have that, but still what we have is still pretty bad. I'm just glad that we get to see him kind of find that evolution, because I think that it's a strong journey that he goes on here.
You know, it's funny because I'm a huge Iron Man fan, and I was thinking about that in terms of Iron Man's first movie. Tony Stark is a cocky jerk, arrogant, narcissistic at the start of that movie, and he absolutely still is at the end of the movie. It's not really till like his third movie that he really starts to challenge that. And I feel like for him it works because it does at least feel like he's pushing everyone around, but he's not being... He backs it up, I guess, to some extent. Where where I'm kind of going with this is I feel like if Thor didn't have this journey in the first movie, I don't think he'd be anywhere near as good a character. Like, I don't think you could we get to the second Thor movie and he's still cocky and arrogant and narcissistic, but who cares because he's badass.
Right. Yeah. It's an important change for this particular character because, and I think it's just because of the way that he is such an arrogant royal who just is so dismissive of everything else. So I think it's good that we, you know, have that. And as we've said, you know, at least Tony had kind of he was willing to kind of joke about himself, I think, and that helped, because I don't think Thor would have done that.
I think it's very true.
Yeah.
And so then we sort of close out with this large giant kind of menacingly approaching, and Loki now wants to accept the kind of offer Laufey's made about like leave now and everything will be fine. And then Thor just turns and gives him this look, and that's where our minute ends.
I love that slow head turn to just look at him. Mm-hmm. It's so funny.
Well, it's like, you know, he was, if anything, I suppose he was hoping that Loki would say, yeah, you know, not on your life sort of thing, and they'd get ready to fight. And it's just like the reaction is like, huh? What? You know, like that, that sort of look. I love it. This is our Frost Giant Sentry, played by Darren Kendrick, who is walking out here. We're going to have a lot of Frost Giants in the next sets of minutes. A lot of them are people I will not be able to identify because of the amount of makeup they're wearing. There are actually 6 credited people as Frost Giants in the actual credits of the film, as not to mention a number of them that people have listed themselves uncredited on IMDb. But it's very hard to tell. So I'll call out the ones that I know that I can certainly identify as we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Oh, and one other note that I think it's going to be interesting to look at as we start watching these Frost Giant warriors, that this is what it says on the Marvel wiki, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki that I reference from time to time. They use tattoos on their skin to show off their military rank. And I really don't know where to look for the tattoos, because they have so many marks on their skin. And I'm like, is that just their skin, or are those the tattoos? Are some of these actually clothes? And it's just kind of the way that it's designed. I have a very difficult time distinguishing that. And certainly as we kind of go through this week, we'll look at this and try to figure out, are those tattoos or aren't they? And because certainly, like, and this is something else, like when we see Laufey up on his throne, finally, we get some close-ups. I mean, he's got all those lines on his face still that I guess are tattoos. I'm not exactly sure. But to our question, when we were asking, I think last week, about does Laufey look older, he does actually look more gaunt. Like if you compare his face now as opposed to when we saw him at the beginning of the film, his cheeks are definitely more sunken in. And so there definitely is some, he may not look older, but he certainly looks more worn down.
He's had a rough time since then.
Yes, a rough 1,000 years.
We'll talk about this more when we get there, but one other thing to think about in terms of those tattoos is that we have one character who is a frost giant but hasn't grown up, left Jotunheim as a baby, who does have a tattoo on the back of his hand already. So clearly that's something like, you know, I don't know if that's because they're tattooing babies or because it's kind of you're born with that on your skin in some way, or we'll get to that for sure.
And that's my question. That's exactly why I have this question, because I'm like, how is that a tattoo?
Interesting.
You know? Different strokes. So any other last comments from either of you before we wrap up this minute?
I don't think so.
No, it's a good minute. We're getting into some, we might just all be leaving. It might be time to just walk away from Jotunheim. They're going to shake hands.
I think Loki will win out. Thor looks like an even-headed fellow.
Yeah, right.
Well, Cass, so for people who want to find more about the Lord of the Rings podcast or other stuff you're creating, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I am part of a podcast network called Dueling Genre. You can find Lord of the Rings Minute, which I co-host with my husband, Norman. Well, I used to. We're done with that. But you can find like almost 700 episodes of that mess, and many other Movies by Minute podcasts and other things on duelinggenre.com. I also co-host The Doctor's Companion, which is a Doctor Who podcast, if you like Doctor Who. And I executive produce an audio drama about superheroes called Geek by Night. So if you like superheroes, clearly you do because you're listening to this podcast, go ahead and do me a favor and check that one out too, because we work very hard on it and I'm very proud of that show. And you can find all of those on duelinggenre.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being a guest. I'm really excited to have you on for the rest of this week in these 5 minutes. Andy, thank you as always. And to all of our fans, thank you so much for being a part of this, and have a good day.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.